I greet you in an unexpected language. That's the greeting by the Amazulu, the Zulus of South Africa. And I speak to you and greet you, Black Power Radio and Black Power Media, for the work that you're doing for liberation for us all. I've read about you recently by reading the work of Joy James. And congratulations. Keep on doing what you're doing. Do it bigger, do it blacker, do it stronger. With love, not fear. This is Mumia Abu Jamal. Amba.
What's happening, good people? We are live and direct. This is Black Power Media. We have a very special broadcast today. As many of you may know, we have a new international correspondent that is out in Africa, and he'll be reporting on some findings and some historical data, some geopolitical information, so on and so forth. Coming from the continent, coming from a recent event there. We have with us our brother and comrade, Dhoruba Bin Wahad. Dhoruba, what's happening, my man? Dhoruba, are you there? Okay, we're trying to find Dhoruba. He is... I guess the Dhoruba's here with his theme music. We can't stay still.
My brother.
What's happening, my brother? So you got your new theme music going. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, get out the way, bitch. Get out the way.
Hey man, it's hard out here. They say it's hard out here for a pimp, but it's much rougher on a, you know what I mean?
Yes, I know, brother.
Man, good to see you. You know what I'm saying? We got the Harlem backdrop just in case folks are unfamiliar. You know what I mean? With the streets that that some great people marched through, stomped through, and spoke through. That looks like a familiar scene, man. Can you describe that scene, brother? What does it look like to you?
Man, I know the Lennox Pharmacy ain't there no more. It's probably Whole Foods.
Okay.
But the Lennox Pharmacy ain't there no more.
It ain't there no more.
Ain't there no more.
No
You
doubt.
know, so yeah, Harlem's changed, man, but it's still a domestic colony. It's still part of resonates as part of the Pan-African legacy of Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, you know, and we you know, we try to be consistent with that legacy. You know, we must be consistent with that legacy. Of course, a lot of young people in Gen Z and Gen X, they haven't really researched or came up with a cogent understanding of the Black radical and Pan-African tradition, the anti-imperialist, anti-white supremacist position that harkens back to the Fifth Pan-African Congress, which of course is the subject that we're going to talk about right now, a commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the Fifth Pan-African Congress, which was convened in Manchester, England in 1945. And there was Kwame Nkrumah, George Padmore, W.E.B. Du Bois, and other icons of our sojourn in the Western Hemisphere, struggle that we presented. And I just want to point out, like I did when I did my address at this commemoration the day before yesterday, that 1945, you should look it up. You should go on YouTube and check the context, the historical context. It was in 1945 that the U.S. and its allies, the victors in World War II against Nazi Germany and imperialist Japan and their allies, fashioned the world order that's crumbling today. They created the United Nations in 1945. They launched the, the Bretton Woods Accords a year later. They established the IMF and the World Bank. And then in 1948, they launched the last European settler state onto the Western Asia, which was the Zionist European settler state of Israel. That's when they declared their independence, declared themselves as a nation, and the United States recognized them. I think it's also important to understand that it was in 1945, at this same moment, the Africans on the African continent that had been devoid of colonial or had not had colonial direct control over their territory because France and England were at war. And so besides supplying soldiers to the empire, there were the Kwame Nkrumahs, there were the Modibo Kayetas, there was the Julius Nyereres, Jomo Kenyatta, who began to organize independent movements to free themselves from colonial rule. And sure enough, in 1945, the United States launched the Marshall Plan to revitalize and to resuscitate devastated Europe. Europe was laid waste by World War II. The Soviet Union had lost 25 million people fighting Nazi Germany in that war. Europe was divided between East and West. The economies of England and France and Italy were devastated. And the United States, which was the industrial heart of the Allies' struggle against fascism, conducted a program called the Marshall Plan. And it was similar to the devices that were included after World War I when Germany was beaten in the Versailles Treaty. It was designed to resuscitate the wealth of those billionaires and corporations that were squandered or developed in the world wars. And so the Rockefellers and all of those who had supplied and helped the Nazis in Germany wanted to get repaid for their money that was lost. And so they devised the Marshall Plan. And the Marshall Plan revived Germany, revived France. And the first thing France and England did was to go back into colonies in India, in Asia, and in Africa and try to recolonize, reestablish their colonial rule. And they were met with armed resistance with Frelimo in Mozambique, the MPLA in Angola against the Portuguese, and of course the CPP party led by Kwame Nkrumah here in Ghana. And Ghana was the first to achieve its liberation from British colonial rule in 1957. And Kwame Nkrumah stood right here in the capital where I'm sitting, and he said that the liberation and the freedom of Ghana was meaningless without the liberation and freedom and the unity of the whole African continent. And it was that statement that put Kwame Nkrumah into the gun sights, into the sights of the U.S., the Dulles brothers, and their allies. And of course, they conspired with the ever-present Negroes, the ever-present traitors. The military at that time was actively involved in working with the CIA. So Nkrumah was overthrown. And years of Ghanaian struggle to achieve genuine independence, of course, involved indebting themselves to the IMF and the World Bank, having military training, having their military trained and Ghanaian forces dispersed to peacekeeping duties for the United Nations. And so we are moved out of that period right now. We're in a new period. The United States hegemony over the global system of Western dominance is on the slide. It's being challenged. It's being challenged in Africa. It's being challenged by China. It's being challenged in Latin America by the new left-moving governments in Latin America, like Venezuela and Colombia, who are now being targeted by the U.S. For destabilization and regime change. So we need to understand that right now, in this historical moment, this conference, this fifth Pan-African commemoration, this conference commemorating the 5th anniversary of the Pan-African Congress in Manchester, is very pivotal in time. And I just want to end by saying history doesn't repeat itself. That's not why I'm saying this, but it rhymes. And so this is a moment when the genocide in Western Asia and U.S. failed policies abroad, and then this challenge to the rising hegemony of China and Venezuela and Cuba and other non-aligned countries is placing the United States in a precarious position. And they're becoming increasingly violent and arrogant and very, very racist in their foreign policies. And we need to be aware that this is a translation from what's going on at home right now, with armed agents of the state roaming the streets with machine guns and face masks and armored vests in anonymous vehicles. Reminds us of the brown shirts in the Gestapo of Germany in 1939, when Hitler began to consolidate his power. And so in Germany, so we know that the migrant populations that are being targeted, the concentration camps that are being built in the United States to house them, is just a step further in the consolidation of ethno-European Christian white supremacy. They want this America to remain white. And we need to stop all this bull crap, talking about Democratic and Republican parties. Both parties are on board with the concept of the United States remaining an ethno-Christian white dominated society. And they know that the potential and the change that's coming because of browning of America, because of brown people in America and black people in America, they know that in less than 25 years, they will not be able to rig the electoral system the way they have rigged it for the past 200 years. And so that's why they're gerrymandering. That's why they're going after DEI. That's why they're closing down educational facilities. That's why they're criminalizing dissent, is because they want this to remain an ethno-Christian white supremacist settler state as it first started out. And so we need to understand as African people that's captured here, that in essentially a domestic colonized situation in the urban areas, that we have to begin to take control of those local institutions that manage our public safety, that control our access to food and resources, and we have to become our own first responders in national emergencies. And this is why, just to end, why the election in New York is so pivotal. When an insurgent, a Muslim born in Uganda, wins the election in the capital of capitalism, New York, these crackers have lost their minds. They lost their minds. They start classifying Mandani with classifications that are ahistorical and contradictory. They made him a communist Muslim. They call him a communist Muslim. That's what this babbling idiot from Texas, Cruz, said. Then they called him, that's like calling Muslim imams, what do you call them? Atheist Muslim.
Atheist Muslim, right.
Yeah. So,
right.
So we need to understand the fact that the Black electoral class, with very few exceptions, are not jumping on this and are not vocal in this, tells us something. We learned just recently in New York that black, so-called black, the black left segment of the Democratic Party was told not to support a candidate that's opposing Leonard Jeffries and not Leonard Jeffries, Hakeem Jeffries, right, in Brooklyn. And not to oppose him. The Hakeem Jeffries, who's on AIPAC's tit, Hakeem Jeffries, that one of them DJ kids called AIPAC Shakur, he blasphemed the Shakur name, you know, in jest and in joking. That's because he knows that the Shakur name resonates with generations of Black people. So they've been trying to co-opt everything that related to the insurgency and movements of the 60s. That's a whole nother issue. But I'm just saying, the Democratic Party is conspiring to make sure that Hakeem Jeffrey stays in power. And that's why I was playing my song, my theme song, Get Out the Way, bitch. Get out the way. And he ain't gonna get out the way until we move him out the way. You know, that all politics is local. So they need to know that the same constituency that voted idealistically to put a democratic socialist in power in New York have to understand that that was the easy part of the struggle. The difficult part of the struggle comes now. We're trying to enforce those policies that he claims he wants to implement when he has no control over the armed agents of the state in New York, where the police are resigning in mass and joining ICE. ICE is recruiting NYPD officers, saying that they would be respected as law enforcement. We had the outgoing idiot, the piece of trash, Adams, recruit 5,000 new cops onto the force as he exits. So Mandani doesn't have control over the armed agents of the state in New York. I have heard it from the streets that snitches and informers that's been under the payroll of the NYPD, for instance, have been given carte blanche to go for it. They're getting recycled drugs. They're doing all kinds of things to commit heinous crimes. Weapons are being given to street sets or allowed to be given to them by the police who have them under surveillance, so that the crime rate and violence would rise under this mayor's watch, so they could undermine and defeat his policies. So we need to understand what's taking place. And like I said, we need to hold these Black elected officials accountable. Why is the Black Congressional Caucus silent on a genocide that's been going on 2 years in Palestine? Why are they silent on the most devastating humanitarian crisis of the 21st century that's going on in Sudan, when the United States is supplying the weapons and technology to the former Janjaweed RDF soldiers who are raping and pillaging Sudan through the UAE, through Arab governments that it has alliances with. These same Arab governments are signed on to the Abraham Accords with the United States to make Western Asia into a billionaire's paradise by expelling the Palestinian people off their land. We need to be clear on what's happening here. We need to be clear on African governments taking migrants from the United States for $5 million and $6 million a head. You see, we need to be clear on these things. Who are these people dealing with this? Why isn't the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus and those Black people who are on the Foreign Relations Committee, why aren't they outraged and asking these questions? You see, so we have to take the fight. The fight for Pan-African international solidarity, for anti-white supremacy. We have to take this fight to our misleadership and make them stand up, or yo, bitch, get out the way. So now
check it out. Check it out, Black Power Media. This is Dhoruba Bin Wahad with his new theme song. You know what I mean? I'm riding shotgun today. I'm not even hosting. I'm just here. You know what I'm saying? Because this is the man with the plan. You know what I'm saying? So y'all can't say I got him to say nothing. This his show. I'm just here. I'm texting.
Oh wow, that's cold.
But check it. So you mentioned a few things though.
I'm gonna drop a lug now, right?
I already know. You mentioned a few things.
That's like Angela Davis kicking homeboy to the curb. You know, Michelle McGee.
Here you go, do me like that.
Beginning of the trial. You know, we all know what happened after that.
That's super low blow. But anyway, yo, I can't even go no further after that. Rise and Power, Michelle McGee. I want to say, because you mentioned a few different things. You said, first of all, you talked about the 5th Pan-African Congress, but also the Dulles brothers, and you mentioned, Gen Z, millennials, so on and so forth. So many people are unfamiliar with the Dulles brothers. So I want to give this quick, side note. When he's talking about the Dulles brothers, we're talking about John Foster Dulles, who's the Secretary of State, and his brother Allen Dulles, who was the director of the CIA. Dulles Airport is named after John Foster Dulles, Dulles Airport in D.C. So that shows you what they think of you. And Allen Dulles, of course, like I said, he was director of CIA. Now, their significant actions included the 53 Iranian coup, which they called Operation Ajax, the 1954 Guatemalan coup, the Bay of Pigs, and so many other different atrocities that took place here in the United States and abroad. So they reward them, and they reward you, and they put it in your face by, naming this airport after them. So whenever you go through DC, you got to walk through the halls of Dulles. You know what I mean? So I just want folks to know that, because oftentimes, people talk about the MLKs and how all the MLKs are bad across the country, so on and so forth. The capital, the U.S. Capitol, when you fly your ass into Dulles Airport, just know that you are, for all practical purposes, honoring or being reminded, rather, of these atrocities that took place damn near half century ago. And they continue to take place.
And I think I like to add to that, the Dulles brothers, the head of the CIA brother, he was the one that managed the major transition of the OSS into the CIA at the end of World War II, during the height of the Cold War. He was also had his fingers and hands in the assassination and murder of Patrice Lumumba in the Congo and the rise of Mobutu. He also managed the trade in opium from the Middle East through Italy, through France, into the United States and into the veins of Black African people in the 1950s, when heroin was tragic magic and was laying our communities to waste. So it was one of the Dulles brothers that did this, and also camouflage for the fact that the corporations that are in the banking system that we now have made their money off the drug trade, off the opium wars. And they turned around and outlawed cannabis and drugs to the American people, and built institutions like Harvard, and built institutions like the IMF and all of these banking conglomerates and stuff. So we need to understand that what we are living in today is the consequence of what happened yesterday. And now we should be mature enough, given the advantage of instant communications and computers and the ability to gather data and information on a massive scale. We should understand that information is intelligence. And if you know the truth will set you free, but only if you act on it.
Word up. Now, and I'm glad that you added that, because we kind of sidetracked with Dulles, but it also reminds me of the whole United Fruit Company, which became Chiquita Banana and just the banana wars and all that type of stuff, just the involvement. And it's like some of the things we're talking about right now, we can't dive all into it, but take note and go back and check out the banana wars. You know what I'm saying? Do a deep dive of the Dulles brothers themselves, because of the fact that when you talk about, between the Dulles brothers and JFK, not JFK, the Dulles brothers and Hoover, you're talking about, when you talk about 21st century or 20th century crimes or war criminals, these folks are definitely in the top 5, if not top 10. They throw everything on Hitler as if, he was the only one. You could take it back to Leopold and all of these cats. But at the same time, when you really, really, really dive into it, the U.S. has played an extraordinary role on exterminating humans across the planet, and their work ethic still resonates to this day. You know what I mean? Which leads me to, taking it back to 80 years ago, because of the fact that we talked about a few different things. And I would definitely have to throw a rock at you when I see you about putting me and Angela Davis and what's that? That was cold right there.
I got inshallah, I got books coming out, and I'm too far along to care much about these niceties anymore. because I've lost comrades. I lost a beloved Imam, you know,
Indeed.
just
Rising
just
power,
a week
Imam
ago.
Talib. Yeah.
Yeah, may Allah be pleased with
Imam
him.
Talib.
And his passing was devastating to me. You know, it devastated me, and because he was a good man.
Give folks a brief on Imam Talib, because of the fact that, again, I know folks are probably watching like, man, I thought they was going to be talking about one thing. Nah, this is a discussion. It's not just an interview or whatever the case is. There's so much going on that you know what they say, you be getting hit with so many rights, be begging for a left. Imam Talib, let's give him his flowers real quick, man. You know, and
I mean, you know, it's part of history again. There arose with the success of the COINTELPRO operations against the Black Panther Party, against other Black radical organizations. By 1970, 71, you know, the so-called Black Power movement, the so-called civil rights movement had been completely or irrevocably divided and neutralized. And out of this arose a whole group of young African Americans who, in searching for a means of struggle, began to gravitate towards Islam. And they created the Dar es Salaam movement in the eastern United States. This was a massive movement of Orthodox Islam. It was completely contrary to the practices of the Nation of Islam at that time. At that time, the Nation of Islam was not following the Mathab and the Hadiths of Orthodox Muslims. And so that, having said that, this movement became sensationalized with a robbery. I mean, with an expropriation attempt at an arms dealer at a gun store in New York, where a police officer was killed, and 3 Muslims from the Dar movement were taken into custody, and they went through trial and they were given the death penalty. And at this time, the United States saw that this movement of Muslims was germinating and taking hold in poor communities, especially Black communities and Latino communities. So they engaged in an operation to destroy this movement, this Dar es Salaam movement, and they employed I believe it was a Wahhabi cleric who claimed to be some type of authority or whatever, who fomented violence and division within the Dar movement and the faction. Now, out of this movement came the likes of Imam Talib and Imam Al-Amin, Latif Al-Amin. Out of these things came imams from the African diaspora, who were dedicated Muslims, who were principled men, and who reached into the prisons to support those of us who were in prison and who were subject to the ultimate repression, the prison environment. Some of them were chaplains. Now, it needs to be noted that if you go into the history, New York State prisons didn't have Muslim mosques and places for Muslim prayer. It was the Nation of Islam that filed a suit in New York federal court for equal treatment religion, that they had to institute Muslim chaplains. And some of the first Muslim chaplains was Imam Talib and Imam Latif Al-Amin and other brothers like this. These were brothers that came into the prison and taught us. They came into the prisons and questioned our treatment when we were being beaten and thrown into the box. They would lead us in prayer. They were very much a part of our very ability to practice Islam in the prisons. And Imam Talib was one of those men. And he was the type of man that used to come visit me when they would throw me in the hole and ship me 300 miles north in isolation in the winter. Imam Talib might show up at any moment and knock on my bars and say, "Salaam alaikum, brother, you okay?" You see, that's why his passing That's why his passing devastated me so. I've known that man for over 30, 40 years.
Yes. Yes.
And he was a good man. And so whenever a good man passes, it takes something out of humanity, takes something away from the rest of us. And I'm just grateful that he built the Masjid, the MIB in Harlem, that came out of Malcolm's vision of the Muslim
Mosque Incorporated.
Muslim Mosque Incorporated. That he has some comrades that I've pounded the big yard with, like Mikhail DeVoe, who will stand up, who will be the next man up in the Imam's image, and I'm grateful for that. He also is a soldier, and he will step up. So that's gratifying for me to know. So I didn't intend to go off on this tangent, and neither did you.
No, it's good and it's necessary, because I remember, years ago us visiting his masjid together, hanging out, and then even I think it was maybe a few weeks ago when we was cracking jokes because you saying you were there at the masjid, and I was like, man, poor Imam. I'm like, I'm telling him like, man, I'm gonna make dua for you. You over there, you got him up in the masjid.
Well, it's ironic. It's ironic you mentioned that, because two days before he passed, Jamal Joseph, who was one of the 21, and my comrade in the Black Panther Party in the BLA, we sat with Imam Talib, and he served us coffee from his wheelchair, wow. And we talked about old times, and we laughed about those days when we didn't have anything, when we was, struggling and everything. And we had that little joy. And I remember him sitting in the door in his wheelchair as we got on the elevator. He said, man, it was wonderful to have this talk. And that was the last time I saw him alive.
Wow. And that was 2 days prior to his transition. Yeah, man, I'm glad that that y'all got to go check him out, before, that's a beautiful thing. I know that you always had reverence for each other, you know what I mean? But so it's good to it's always a beautiful thing, especially you not living in the US, you know what I'm saying, but being able, to see him. So he transitioned right before you left, or?
That's right. He transitioned he transitioned 2 days after that, and I left on the day of his janazah. Yeah. So when I landed in Accra, on the 17th, and his janazah was the morning of the 17th, but we 5 hours ahead.
Right.
So, yeah. And I cut my trip short for this 5th Pan-African commemoration. Which I think we should return to.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's part of it. And it's a good segue. See, that's what shows that you're an excellent host. So you don't even need me here, but let's talk about that Fifth Pan African Congress. I think that the one thing that I want folks to be clear about, you played a role, and you were actually there on behalf of us, and we give thanks and gratitude for you being willing to step up and be a correspondent there. So we want to know two things. One, because you talked about some of the people who were in attendance 80 years ago. You know what I'm saying? I would like, if you don't mind, to touch on the importance of that 80 years ago, but also why it was important for you to be here 80 years later, because if I'm not mistaken, shoot, you were like an infant when the first one came up. When the first one came out.
Yeah. And I forgot which one it was. I think it was the 8th Pan-African Conference or something like that in Uganda. Somebody would have to correct me on that one, but I went to that one when I got out of prison. But to answer your question from the beginning, the significance of the 5th Pan-African Congress in 1945 was the context that I just put it in. How the Europeans were restructuring the global economic, military, and political order to ensure their global supremacy. They were using their victory in World War II to build their empire, to pay themselves back for the war they started. Okay, and if you go into World War I, they did the same thing. Okay, they did the exact same thing with the Versailles Treaty and making Germany pay reparations. Okay, and so this Congress now, you know, is only a reaffirmation of what Nkrumah and Padmore and Du Bois stated in 1945, when they said that colonialism and imperialism could not no longer be tolerated in Africa and in Asia, that our people would rise up and resist it. So they echoed, or they presaged, the struggles in Mozambique and Guinea-Bissau and Algeria and the Congo and they knew that African people would take this opportunity to free themselves from the shackles of colonialism and imperialism. Okay, and the enemy knew this, and we got to remember it was in 1949, just 4 years after the establishment of the United Nations, that Mao Zedong marched into Peking and the People's Republic of China was established. And for, I believe, almost 10 years of its initial existence, it was not recognized by the United Nations because of the Security Council, which was dominated by the former allies of World War II, the United States, France, and Britain. They voted to keep it out, and they recognized Formosa then, which is Taiwan today. That's who they recognized. But they were forced to recognize China when, what was it, Henry Kissinger and Nixon and them did their little Chinese protocol. There's a history behind that too. It was at the height of the Cold War that the United States realized that the rising power, the rising hegemony would be China. Okay, and so I just segued to that to say that brought us to today. Okay, when the United States' grip on global power is slipping because of a genocide going on in Western Asia, when the United States is losing its flunkies in Africa, as young people overthrow regimes, corrupt regimes in Zanzibar, in East Africa, in the Sahel, in Niger, in Mali, and so these young people are rising up right now at the same time that the whole world realizes that the United States is a racist, white supremacist, Christian nationalist entity. And it'll back white supremacy's presence in Western Asia to the hilt. Okay? And let's keep this in context. This is not the first time Europe tried to conquer Western Asia. The first 3 crusades out of Europe were bent on taking the so-called Holy Land from the so-called pagans who were Muslim. And they failed, except for 70 years they occupied Jerusalem and as a territory of Europe. Okay? And it was Saladin the Kurd, the Muslim, who galvanized the Muslim armies and ran them out. So Europe has always been trying to get a wedge and a control of Western Asia. And as you pointed out, the Dulles brothers at the height of the Cold War engineered the coup against Mossadegh. And people don't understand the history of the United States and its relationship to Iran, and how Iran's Muslim revolution transformed the geopolitics in 1979. Because it was under the Shah of Iran that the United States depended on militarily, along with the Israelis, to control the whole Middle East, the Suez Canal, and the Eastern Mediterranean. And when the Muslims took over in 1979, Muslims of Sunni Muslims, all Muslims took to the streets and were overjoyed that the Shah was overthrown. and the United States had to recalibrate its policy. It goes all the way back to the Trilateral Commission's paper in 1975, which I wrote about while I was in prison. And they talked about the way to forward in the Middle East was to divide the Arab regimes that were under the Ottoman Empire and have them collectively support the establishment of the European outpost of Israel. And that's exactly what they're doing now. So we need to understand this is a long plan that they've had in place for decades. This is nothing new.
Right. And I'm glad you point that out, because that's the thing. I mean, you know, it's like the way the American populace operates, it's like a reinvention every term. You know what I'm saying? It's like there's no long-term trajectory. They don't see it for what it is. They don't see it for white supremacy has centuries of planning, and they'll break it down into sections and segments so it can be decades or whatever the case is.
But you know, I wouldn't even give them that much intelligence. They have the major feature of Western Euro democracies is that they have the delusion of they could create the delusion of manipulation of integration of cultures. They will accept cultural differences long as they don't result in political power. Long as they don't result in so-called ethnic political power. So they could always play off one group against the other. They could play, they've played us off against back in when they were building the railroads. They played the recently released slaves in the South off against the Chinese working on the railroads. They played us against the native people. They played when the Poles came, when the immigrant Poles came into New York, they played them against Italian migrants. This has always been a feature of capitalism. This has always been a feature of the rich and the wealthy to how to control the masses of people. You see, and we need to understand this and research this. So we cannot play into this. This is why you see the Black Panther Party came up with the concept in the late 1970s, the Rainbow Coalition. We talked about the organization, right? Yeah, in Chicago, in New York. That's why we developed the idea and the concept of a united front against fascism, and bringing the left and the progressive movements in to build a third political force, and hopefully build the type of coalitions for a third political party. Of course, our Negro representatives at that time, the poverty pimps, the Jesse Jacksons, the Minutemen, pork chop preachers, they sabotaged all of that. Okay, but this is a new day. You see, and we have to hold the pork chop preachers and the saboteurs and the agent provocateurs. We have to hold them to account now. We have to call them out by name. And we have to show, because we have access to data now. We don't have to just go name calling. We got records.
Got the deliver, got the proof.
We got receipts.
So question. So here we are. This Fifth Pan-African Congress piece, it just ended a few days ago. What were the results? What role did you play, and how do you see, what do you see coming out of it? Because of the fact that I know that, you know, I've been knowing you for decades, and I know you're not the type to meet for the sake of meeting, and I know you weren't there to rub shea butter on the palms of dignitaries. You know what I'm saying? What was the results? What did it mean? You know what I'm saying? And how do you see, what do you see coming out of it?
Well, let me say that, you know, soon we'll have an entire, the whole video of the entire conference from beginning to end, and I will get it to you and others so that you could see the presentations. We will be reaching out to some of the organization reps that were at this conference, and so I urge you to try to identify. I mean, there was a Cuban delegation led by the Cuban Communist Party. There was delegations from Burkina Faso. There were delegations from as far away as Venezuela. In fact, I believe the foreign minister, or the deputy foreign minister, was talked by Zoom live at the conference, and there were representatives from all over West Africa, and then there was the diaspora contingent. The AARP reps were there, Kwame Tore's old party, and everyone was very vocal and adamant about returning to the Pan-African vision of Kwame Nkrumah and the initial decolonizers of Africa. The African unity was essential, that Africa had to control its own resources, that we had to move out of the shadow of financial debt to institutions and into using our resources to benefit our people. And so this move requires the input and the connection of African people in the diaspora. The African diaspora is the largest diaspora on the planet because of the European and Arab slave trade. So we need to organize effectively our reflection of this policy. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is that this was organized primarily by the socialist movement of Ghana. I have had a long relationship with this organization and the comrades there, and they are highly respected. There was a Russian delegation there, and there was a delegation from China, the Chinese Communist Party. The new President Mahama, is the one that attended the conference, took time out to attend the conference and deliver the keynote. And I think it's important for us to go online and listen to this keynote. We should have it streamed shortly. In his keynote, he talked about reparations and compensation for the African slave trade and the colonization of Africa. And he talked about bringing this about by a united Pan-African continent that could exert the type of economic pressure and economic control on their former colonizers to return to a situation or a paradigm where the wealth that was stolen from Africa, both human and material, is returned. This means for us that we have active reparation movements in the United States. And that reparation movements in the United States will remain ephemeral illusion and dream unless this is connected to concrete political power. Okay? No country has ever paid reparations that weren't defeated in war or weren't somehow sanctioned by the international finance or international community. So reparations isn't just paid based on guilt, because it won't never be paid based on guilt, because these crackers have no shame and they have no morals and they have no inhibition against killing and murdering poor people in order to maintain their power. So we need to understand, talking about reparations to the United States without a power base, without geopolitical power, is like dreaming out of season. And also we need to understand that if we are going to seriously talk about any type of empowerment, we have to create the type of united front and coalition of alternative where people, of ordinary people, where people can get outside of the duopoly system of the Republican wolf and the Democratic fox. They all both canines, as Malcolm said. And we need to learn. We need to get our dog training skills under control. We need to understand how to control these mutts. You see what I'm saying? And so I think that this conference was important because, like I said, going forward, we're going to be reaching out to some of the delegates that were there. I talked to some of them. We will perhaps be establishing fact-finding and solidarity visits to their respective countries so that we could have a first-hand account to how the people are building or rebuilding their sovereignty, and contribute and learn from that, contribute to it and learn from that process. But I think we need to understand that Africa is rising. And Africa is rising as the unipolar world becomes stronger and stronger, as we're able to exit the economic change that bind us by white supremacist capitalism and the system of finance capitalism. And so those delusions of black, black capitalism, those delusions of financial literacy that don't understand the revolutionary character of fiat capital and the disintegration of the current banking system and the type of economic catastrophe that's right over the horizon. If they don't understand that, then all of this, buy black and black dollars in the community is just rhetoric. It's just a diversion. You see, we have to understand where wealth comes from. It comes from land and gold. And we have to understand who has gold and who has land. And we have to understand that only when we're able to exert an economic consequence on our enemies here will they respect us, and will they realize that there's parameters and limits that we have to establish in our communities and be respected. And this includes controlling those institutions in our community, and that's very, very important. This is why ICE agents are running around the streets. And this is why the present administration is talking about the enemy within and talking about deploying the military into U.S. cities in order to train them. Train them for what? Against who? Against the so-called American people? No, to train them against black folks. They always train their armed crackers against black people. These cops came out of the militia of slave patrols. We don't get this twisted. We still at war. It's just war is a continuation of politics by violent means, and politics is a continuation of war by nonviolent means. We're in a nonviolent means phase by which we're the victims. We're the ones being murdered. We're the ones that's being victimized, and the armed agents of the state are running them up, claiming that they're workers, having their unions and societies, claiming that they have rights as workers. Nah, these are armed agents of the state, and they have the same rights and privileges of the military. They need to be put under public control. They need to be put under the control of the people in the community. And so that's the struggle that we should wage on the electoral level. On the grassroots level, we have to prepare our religious institutions to serve the people, to make sure that the people can survive when the water is cut off, when in these urban areas, when there's no access to water and to electricity. What do? How do we survive? Don't think these crackers won't turn off the lights and won't turn off the water in our community. They're absolutely ruthless. They've committed genocide of the native people. Their track record speaks for itself. So let's not get it twisted. We need to not mourn. We need to not get scared, because liberation doesn't come from fear. Liberation will not arise from fear. It said, what's the sister say? What will our season be, which starts from fear? Live and go out, have your blooming in the noise and whip of the whirlwind. Because it's in the whirlwind that you are valid, that you are a citizen, that you are a human being. So we have to join this fight for humanity. We have to join this fight for our survival. And I think that this conference gave us an eye-opening opportunity to link with other struggles and with our brothers and sisters on the continent, and build a type of base that we will be respected, and so that's why I think this conference was important, and so that's what I would be working towards. I didn't have any type of organizational input into this conference whatsoever. I just had good relationships and fraternal relationships with brothers and sisters in the current government, and with the Socialist Party and various activists and movements here in Ghana. And they gave me the opportunity to contribute. And so I want to say shout out to them, and to the Pan-African TV network, and of course to the president and the staff the Republic of Ghana.
No doubt. And I want to remind folks that this is part of a series, because I know there are a number of different dignitaries and folks from throughout the diaspora who attended that we're looking forward to being in conversation with. And definitely, we're hoping to work closely with Pan-African TV, because I think that it is necessary at this stage in the game for us to tie it in. You're talking about so many different. I think it's a great opportunity. I'm definitely happy that you cut your trip short here to get back home to witness and participate, and also to continue to tie in with other individuals and organizations who play intricate roles in in our liberation. So definitely looking forward to having some of the other comrades on deck in coming days. So
inshallah. Yeah. So I'm glad I'm very happy that I was able to show up at this particular point. And so I'm moving forward. I think that in African History Month, which is in February, I think that we could have some really good, solid communications and information transfers going on. We need to organize some international forums where some of the ideas that we as activists have in the diaspora can be bounced off of the realities and the challenges the comrades on the continent face. Having lived there for so long, it's a bit daunting. It seems a bit daunting because, education is very important. And many of the African young people, have been the victims of colonial and post-colonial residual absentee mentality in education, but that's beginning to change. And with the young people that are coming up, their voices have to be heard, and they're making their demands heard. And for someone of my age and my background, that can be a bit inspiring. When I look at all of the devastation and poverty that's surrounding us right here, and how the people of Africa, they're not awake, but they're young people. But their young people are becoming awake, are coming of age, and so there's a serious class struggle that's going to ensue, and it's going to have ethnic and tribal features to it. It's going to be an international class struggle, because we see some of our major poverty pimps and misleadership class, they gravitate towards these types of leaders. They gravitate towards the opportunity and programs. So we have hip hop artists coming over, getting dual citizenship and talking smack on radio and haven't got a clue about what's going on. Some of them get, they might be given a chieftaincy in a village because they got money and notoriety, and they did a cameo appearance, with DeVito or somebody, on Afrobeat artists. You see, these circumstantial and cultural affectations that pass for solidarity have to be put in proper perspective. The fact of the matter is that unless those artists in that genre really take some type of step forward, in order to fashion a common approach to our international music, to who we are as a people, because we know that the music that flows out of the West and out of the United States in particular is rooted in African in our African experience. Rock and roll came from our blues hollers in the fields. We know where all this music comes from, whether it's jazz, whether it's country or whatever, you know. And so we need to understand that we have roots too, and that bringing that together just on the cultural level, on the musical level, is a good thing. But without a Pan-African consciousness, without a consciousness and awareness of their role here, we get the babbling idiots like what's that knucklehead boxer's name, Mayweather, flying to Israel, buying bulletproof vests for the IDF. You see,
Eric Adams, same thing.
Yeah.
You know,
Eric Adams, he's looking to get an ambassador job somewhere in Dubai so he could party hardy, you know. And so, I mean, we got buffoons like this, right. You see. Right. And you know, some of them are unconscious buffoon, but a buffoon is a buffoon, you know, and I hate to be hard and critical on that, but it's playing a serious role in undermining genuine Pan-African identity. Right. You see, because we have factions in the United States that are anti-Pan-African to begin with.
Right. Right. We're gonna definitely revisit this conversation. Unfortunately, time is running out. But I want to remind folks to check out what it is we're doing and also support the critical work of Dhoruba Bin Wahad. You know, his email address, Dhoruba at gmail.com. Dhoruba at gmail.com. You know, you appreciate this work, shoot a Zelle that way. You know what I'm saying? We'll have it in the liner notes. But definitely we want to continue to support, because one of the things we talk about is how we quote unquote, you know, we love to see our freedom fighters. We love to take pictures with them. We love to talk about, you know, to quote them and to do the T-shirts and, you know, whose nephew, cousin, dog sitter you was and all that type of shit. But when it comes to the actual life support, we're absent there. I'm definitely gonna put you know, in the line of notes a way for you to contribute to what's going on. You talk about a brother who is still out there in the front line, 80 plus years old. You know what I mean? And again, you know, we crack our jokes and all that. You know, and I've been knowing you for quite a while, and I want to say that I appreciate your work. We appreciate the fact that you are still moving, and just how you said a little while ago about being inspired by the youth that are actually moving along. I can say that the youth are inspired by you and your work, because the generation that came up under you all, a generation that myself and others represent, you know, we are happy to see that you know, that there's still some light at the end of the tunnel. And we say, you know, rise in power, may Allah be pleased with Imam Talib, who we spoke about earlier, Asada, you know, Sekou, and all our Baba Bilal, Sunni Ali, and all the freedom fighters, Messiah, who came and who we walk with, and who exist in the spiritual essence. So to them we say Ashe, and we say to you, brother, keep on fighting, because it ain't over till it's over, like the song go.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just stay strong, keep it moving, son.
No doubt. No doubt. Peace. Checking out Black Power Media, and in the more the words of Dhoruba, move it, get out the way. We'll holler at y'all in a minute. This is Black Power Media. We out.
Peace.
Peace.
So how'd that go?